Welcome to Model Engineers Laser. My name is Holly and this is part 29 of our jack build. Since our last video you will have noticed that the lubricator has been removed. That is because in test fitting the back of our cab to the loco itself, the pipes of the lubricator were fouling on the back of the cab. So it's going to need a bit of tweaking, very similar to the other video where we bend the pipes accordingly just to be out the way. It's going to need to be removed as part of taking everything apart to send it for painting anyway. So we've just removed that for now and it'll help us fit the cab. There's two versions to this. The version that we've done if you've got a lathe and a version if you've not. This is a piece of 3 32-inch brass rod that Ed on his lathe, because I cannot use a lathe, I'm not an engineer, has just drilled a hole in the end of there for me, and we've put a 10BA tap down it for this thread. We've duplicated it on the other end because we're going to cut it in half because it needs 2 support rods on either side of the back of the cab. The next stage is, or the design is, that those screws are going to come in through the bottom here and come up to the top of the cab. So we are going to weld these two sections here to keep them in place and mark off the top here and cut it and repeat the process on this side, or mark it and then solder them at the same stage to then attach it to the cab here. We're going to give the top of this rod a little bit of a pinch. To solder a round rod to flat cab is a little bit tricky, so we're going to give it a little pinch, but you'll see that we'll record that so you can see what's happening. There is an alternative if you don't have a lathe or have somebody around who can drill a hole in it for you. You can use a bit of 3 32-inch copper tube and it would do the same effect, but I've raided a bit of brass that Ed has. We need to check that the bottom of the tube is flush to the bottom of the back of the cab here. You might find when you're doing this that some of the holes are a little bit tight if you've got a bit of solder in them, or depending on what you're doing, so you might need to just fettle out a bit to make it fit, and making sure that it is flush at the bottom. I'm not measuring, I'm eyeballing it because I'm going to overcut at the top here to give myself some room. I'd rather cut it too long than too short because I can always take bits off, but I can't add bits. So I'm just going to check that's flush at the bottom with a bit of a snip. A bit too generous. She says, ping, it's gone flying. There we go. So that's one side, and then we're going to repeat it on the other side. Just take that section from there. This has got quite a bit of solder on it, so I might need to play with this side to get it through. For those of you who've been following, you know I said I was going to keep all the mistakes and the tweaks in, so you know how to fix them. So yeah, you can see I've got too much solder in there that's not coming through there, so I'm just going to wiggle. Oh, it is a bit of perseverance. It's going through. I am going to clean that up a little bit though. I've got it through in the end. Make sure I put the right end in, that's been tapped. It goes on there quite nicely. So what we're going to do now is, with a touch of solder the bars in place and try not to get solder on the screw, so we can easily remove those ready to measure up to have it be able to be soldered in the top of the cab. Ed has reliably informed me, and I do believe him, that by putting some Tipp-Ex on the thread before we solder, it will prevent the solder from travelling down the thread. Now you'll see that I haven't quite gone up to the edge there, and that is because we've got holes in the cab. So I've left a gap which is about the thickness. I haven't measured it, I've eyeballed it because like I'm painting Tipp-Exes. I'm not going to be a precision painter at that level. So I've just painted some Tipp-Ex on to give me that gap there that will sit between the cab and stop the solder from seeping through before I start. One of the other things I've done is just backed the pars off the thread a little to give me a bit of space, and put some flux up there so the solder will travel up, and then fix these in place onto the tube as well. So I'm going to do that with a bit of flux now. Childproof cap. Where's the 6-year-old apprentice to open it for me? So I'm just going to make sure that I get it on the thread in there as well as I go around the whole process. Ed's loitering, so I don't mess it up, so you might hear him in the background. It'd be a shame to get this close to the end and make a huge mistake. So having put my flux in the thread, I've screwed them back down again, and I've put a generous amount at the top as well here. You can see I've screwed that back down, and then hopefully you can see me. It's always a nightmare doing this, to see that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to zoom in, sorry, it might be a bit weird on the camera. Such a professional job this, isn't it? You see that okay? Does that work? Hopefully you can see that. I'll try my best not to get my hand in the way. So I'll apply some heat, get it nice and warm. And that's that flux missing away. There we go. Just apply a bit of solder, let it travel. I'm going to have to tidy it up. That's okay. Hopefully you saw all of that. I can get that side on the shot of camera just about. No, not in shot at all. Just in shot. You can hear that flux hissing away. I'm hoping you can see. Not quite all. It's only a fine, so you don't need a huge amount of solder to get it to move. So if you can get it in the right place, the less you've got to take off when you're tidying it up. Right, I'm going to do that normally without recording for the other side, but it's exactly the same. Having soldered both sides, I've also took a small file and cleaned up around the edges where I might have put a bit too much solder on. There's no point in having these fine details if you're then going to ruin them by flooding them with a bit of solder. It's going to be easy for me to do that now than when that is soldered in place. So just so you can see, it's starting to take shape, and I've just trimmed this side down a little bit more to make it more workable because it was standing quite proud. So you can see that's all been filed down on that side as well. Hopefully I'll get this in a position that you can see where it's all cleaned up. What we've also done is just trimmed off the head of that, because eventually, well, now it's going to be threaded through. So the cab doors go on the back and they fit through the holes on the footplate. I'm not going to lie, we've had to open ours up a bit to test that it actually worked. You might need to do the same on yours as well, just be careful. And as you can see, they slot in quite nicely. We've got this overhang which we'll be dealing with shortly. So next what we're going to do is trim these down so they fit under the cab. Now this is the question. Let's turn this around because it's not very stable. If I'm actually strong enough to do this. Is that okay? Yeah. So I'm going to test it against the flush of the cab and then just bring it down a smidgen. And then, no, Ed, not strong enough. I mixed up the Thanks. Somebody joins the video now, they're going to wonder what's happened to my hands and why they've suddenly got so hairy. Thank you. What I have done is unscrewed these two outer screws that we use to attach the cab. Now we did tap in a previous video that little L plate to attach it so the screw will move with it, but that is for us to be able to pop the cab in the back there and then lift that up and over. And what you're checking for is that you've taken enough off these, so when you squash that down, in theory your cab shouldn't move if you've taken enough off. And then you want to squeeze these down to emulate the screw going tight. And you can still see that that's, well, hopefully you can see that even with that pushed right down, yes it's tight but it's not warping in any way. And the same for that side. Well, there's a little bit of give there, so it doesn't want to go flush to the top, but it's not too tall, which is the main issue. The other thing which I have had to do is my... What's that, sorry darling? You're hungry? You're 6. I'm just doing a video, I'll be with you in a minute, okay? Oh, okay. Okay, you can have some food in a minute. Let me finish this video. So, as I was saying, I've just checked that there's no burrs on the bottom of that, which there were, so I've had to file that down. What we're going to do now is, with all this in place, is just mark the bottom of where that sits on there with a marker pen, because we're going to flatten the top piece in there to enable us to solder it to the cab, and it does sit, she says, flush against the back, so it doesn't fit on this plate here. It will fit along this side here when you're flattening it. You're not squashing it, if you're looking at standing from the cab, you're not squashing it 12 till 6, you're doing it 9 till 3 on the clock for it to sit on this face here, not on the side faces there. So I'm going to grab a marker pen, just marker those up. I'm also going to feed my daughter, as you've heard in the background, and then we're going to give them a little squash with a hammer. You'll see that we've hammered the ends now when the camera comes into focus. There you go. One of the other things we've also done is drill, well, there we go, there's the camera coming. Just took a little flat bladed cutter into the gap there, because with these in the way, you're not going to be able to get your doors in. They don't fit in the gap. But we can't put them in now because they need to come out to be painted. So by cutting a little, when it focuses, when cutting a little slot there, once it's been sent off for painting and come back, we can post the doors. Oh, need to make them a little bit bigger. That hole's a little bit snug. Doesn't quite fit in there. Need to open it up a bit more. But we can post the doors in there once it's all been painted. A little bit so that's where we've got to next. So that's her back together. The slots that we were cut for the doors is going to be wedged against the foot plate there to hold the doors in place once painted. I am through the holes here, balance on the top here, and have put, it's getting a bit of a heavy lump now, the screws back in place there. So she's all held together, but those bars here, you can see we've flattened them, but they're not soldered in, so we now need to do that. This is going to be interesting enough as it is, let alone trying to get it done on camera. So I think the best bit is going to be gingerly laying it on its cab very carefully. You probably can just about see that one up there. So as you can see, we're through the bottom here. We've soldered these in place. Those are flattened and they're sitting against the top. Make sure, I'm going to turn it around to check that, sorry, that they are straight. They've not been bent in any way and you're happy with the position of them. And then, hopefully, I can do this on camera for you. We my fix brush. Flux right in there, being quite generous with it. And on the other side, they don't look particularly evenly placed. I think I might actually need to take a bit off that. That bends out. I don't know if you can see. I don't think you can actually. The gap on that side is significantly smaller on that side. I'll get Ed's opinion. Hang on. Yeah, Ed agreed it had moved, so I just wasn't being as forceful with it as I should have been in terms of getting it to line up. Can you see? Nope, can't see. Let's see a bit there. Let me zoom in and adjust the camera. Sorry if that was making any of you a bit dizzy. There we go. So I've put flux on. My soldering iron's on. And then, if you can hear singing in the background, that's because I did feed the 6-year-old, so she's very happy. Trying to do this without getting my hand in the way. Can you see that? Moving from the top, you should be able to see that. I'm actually pressing quite hard with that soldering iron to make sure that it also applies a pressure to get it to connect. There we go, that's the heat transferring up. I know there's a lot of solder in there, but it's because I can't see what I'm doing. I'm trying to do it on film, but I can clean that up with a bit of a file, that's not a problem. If I do it like that, can you see? There we go, hopefully you can see. Can you see that way? Yeah, you can see. Again, actually applying quite a bit of pressure onto that soldering line to make sure that they're sat down quite nicely. Again, I have flooded it with quite a bit of solder, but that's to make sure I can get it on film at the same time. And that is it all attached. All soldered in nicely, and need to tidy up the bottom of that there, but that can be done later, post painting and when we fit the nut and get that all sorted. The next job we're going to do is drill the hole for the dummy blower pipe, which goes, well, the elbow for it, that goes into the smoke box. That's going to run along the cab here. I've just popped that into the hole there, just the elbow that we got from Simon at Model Earth into that, because that's what we're going to be working from. But to help me, this is just a bit of twin and earth electrical cable that was left over from when we had our house renovated however long ago, and I'm going to use this to help me guide and figure out where I need to drill my hole. To do that, I need to strip out, oh, focus, I'm going to strip out a bit of the copper wire there. Having got two lots of varieties with different thicknesses of cable on the inside, which I think you can see if I hold up against my finger there, just to compare what looks the best really against the cab when we're doing it. And I think the thickest one out, the red, I'll take that out of there, and you can see there is a slight recess in there for it to fit into, and I prefer that one. I did think the blue at first when it comes into focus for you, but I think that might look a bit too thin. I think I prefer the red. It's a 2.5mm thick. Yeah, I'm going to go with the red. I'll strip all that back and use it as a guide to help me. Having stripped the wire, I've got a image of good old Google of Jack, the proper engine, the original engine. And you'll see here that the pipe comes out the smoke box, bends at a good 90-degree angle down, and then 90-degree again to run along the boiler. And then it has another 90-degree bend to run up, and I think it's just proud of the lining and above the boiler there before it goes into the cab. So having used that as a guide and stripped my metal, that isn't fixed in, it's just loose in there. But as a guide, I've gone along and bent, throwing it on the floor, where that wire is going to sit to help me visualise where I need to drill the hole. So that's going to sit like that, that's going to go along there, and I reckon we're going to drill it there. Measured twice, cut once, and that's the rule. Just double check I'm happy. So that's going to be, yep, there we go. I'm going to call that video there and start the next video having drilled that hole, ready to start on the final bits before it goes to painting. Thanks ever so much for joining us, and please like and subscribe. By doing so, it means it unlocks different features that we can do. I think it was something like 200 subscribers meant we could have our own URL and things like that. So it does help, and it's free ways you can support us as a small business. So we do really appreciate it. Thanks ever so much, and see you in the next video.